So I'm Rhonda Francis, and glad to have everybody here. And I know there's some confusion on virtual and in-person and all that. So I just wanted to do an in-person, kind of get to know everybody and see everybody. So we're going to start with, of course, we have snacks and coffee and all that right now for breakfast and, whenever. And then after, at 12, we're going to have lunch. And that'll be the end of the day. So don't leave before you eat, okay? Because we got a lot of food coming, somebody got to eat it. Anyway, so this is Heather Bushelman, and I know a lot of you have been on trainings with her virtually and in person, and she is wonderful. I don't know a whole lot about counseling. I know a little bit about kids, but she really taught me a lot. Still got a long way to go. But so this is Heather Bushelman, and she's from KDE, and she's going to tell you what she does. Okay. And her background, I'll let her do that. Here you go, Heather. Yeah, it'll be louder if you do.
Okay. All right. Y'all hear me? Good? Okay. I have two different things going on here, so we'll see how this goes. Well, good morning. I'm excited to be here in person. I've not got to be with you all in person. This is my first visit to KVEC. So I'm excited. So like Bronna said, I'm from KDE. I've been there 13 months now, I guess, 13 or 14 months. I just came out of my school back December of 2021, I guess, 2022. 2021. But I've been a school counselor for 16 years, in education for 21. I was a teacher before that. And I've got to, now that I work with KDE, I get to oversee, of course, counseling programs and the ILP, yes, that, the minimum graduation requirements, I oversee that, early graduation program for my high school people. There's a lot of changes that have just come out, and there's more coming next year, so just FYI for that. And then I get to go around and just visit like districts. Like yesterday, I was in, where were we at yesterday?
You were in Fleming.
Fleming, thank you. See, I was in Grant County too for my softball game for my daughter. It's like, where am I at? It's been a week. But yeah, we were in Fleming County yesterday. The next week, of course, we'll be in Orlando next week for some stuff. But yeah, I get to travel a lot, so it's really exciting because this is my favorite thing to do is get to come see you all and see what you need, how I can support you. I'll be going to different districts, so anytime you need anything for your district, just email me. If it's I can come, or I know I work a lot with the co-ops. I know I wear Bronna and them out about trainings, collaborations, for a lot of different things. So, but I'm here to support you all. So I'm not part of the KDE that comes down and gets schools on watch or whatever they do. I don't know who that is. I've actually never met them in over a year.
She's a friend.
So yeah, I don't know who those people are. I've had to deal with those people in the past. I don't know. I don't know who they are. So anyway, so today is for you all. I've got slides ready. And so we're going to start talking through some things this time of year to start building your comprehensive programs. I know we've been reactive counseling for 2.5 years, essentially. Between COVID, the weather-related crisis, everything. And so now a lot of counselors are kind of ready to get back to the basics of building their programs proactively versus putting out fires every 5 seconds. Because I know before I left, it's exhausting. I've just been out a year, and it was exhausting for me. So we're going to look at some things today that this time of year is good to start looking at moving into next school year. You're going to be doing a lot of group work, a lot of partner work. We'll probably do it more by levels. If you're within a district here today, that's fine. Like my elementary people, you're probably collaborating middle school, high school, depending on how many of you all are. We might even put secondary all together. So we'll see what our numbers are. All right? Okay. And I told Bronna, like with these slides I've got ready, this is actually part of a huge presentation that's essentially a 5-day training for the whole comprehensive program. So if we have to go a different route, the slides are ready somewhere else and I can grab them. So if you're like, we want more with this, then we can do that today. So it's very flexible. So just know that. So how are we feeling today? So you can hold up your fingers, you can shout it out since we're in a small crowd, which I really appreciate a small crowd. Just hold up the right finger if you do number 1, because yeah. Just be easy with that. It's early.
I say during the day they're probably all of those.
Yeah.
At one time or another.
Yeah. I think I live in number 1 all the time. I think right now it is all the time. Yeah. So. All right. So what we're going to focus on today is we are going to look at the updated framework that just came out in January. I don't know if you've seen it, but all the counseling framework, there's 3 huge pieces that have been updated that you need to be aware of as counselors. And so we're going to just glance over that. It's a 65-page document. We're not reading through it. We're not taking a deep dive into it, but you just need to know the highlights at least. We're going to look at the ASCA model, and we're going to look at some of the domains. Like I said, we will not get into everything today. It is overwhelming to even look at all this today, I'm going to be honest, in a 3-hour training. So we're going to hit this time of year, like I said, what you need to know moving into next school year to be prepared, how to plan, things like that. Okay, so have we seen the diamond? Yes, awesome. Okay. It's actually only about 5 years old. But that model executive summary, and you have the slides, that's a nice, almost, I think it's a 2-pager, just as an overall snapshot of what school counselors are supposed to be doing. So this might be nice to just give your administrators, which we're going to talk about a lot here in a few minutes, a heads up, because we are moving away from guidance. So if your title is guidance, you need to change it. You are not a guidance counselor any longer. If your district calls you guidance counselors, start letting them know you're not called guidance anymore. You're not a guidance specialist. The state is recommending for now at least 2 years. Even EPSB is now calling us school counselors. And there's a big difference in guidance versus school. So I tell my counselors, if in your schools you have a tag on your office that says, usually this says guidance office, put duct tape over it until maintenance can fix it. And when I train principals, I tell them the same thing. I was like, get maintenance over the summer to fix your counselor sign. They're not guidance people any longer. It's a very different role. So that's what we're focusing on, is the ASCA model. Now there are 3 books that ASCA, our national organization, has released. I will tell you, do not read all 3 of these. It is, now depending on how much you like to read. I'm not a reader, but you might be, which is awesome. I totally envy you. The maroon one, that's more of like your textbook. So that will go over very deeply that diamond. It will talk just like a textbook. So if you like that type of reading, that book's for you. The middle one is the one I like, the navy one. It goes over the ASCA model, but it's very short and sweet. It's do's and don'ts for everything, and you're going to see some of it today. Like for your annual calendar, here's what you do, here's what you don't do. So it's very black and white, okay? This one, that's kind of a mesh between the colors, this one just came out a year ago. So this is for your student standards. This tells you what to teach pretty much. And I'm going to show you a website today that will hopefully help you a whole lot, not have to recreate your goals for kids, what you're teaching. It's already there for you done. All you have to do is just click buttons and search. But that book will go very deep into what are you supposed to be teaching your students with your counseling standards, okay? So the middle one, if you want to just get a glimpse, if you have time over the summer, you usually try to read a book. The navy one is where you might start, because it's a very quick read. And it's easy to reference. So, okay, so we've got the diamond, and then that's our new framework. If you haven't seen it, the colors have changed, everything's been updated. That's how it connects to your national model. So everything we do in Kentucky, ASCA has now, they've given us permission, they've approved of all of it. Everything we do is based on what they recommend nationally for our counselors. So you're doing everything nationally, so you don't have to memorize both. If you're following our framework, you're good, because it's based on ASCA. So some of the practices, as you can see when you do look at the framework, define is where we'll start today. That actually doesn't take very long, but that's in your Kentucky practices for 1 and 2 inside of your framework. So again, you don't have to memorize your framework. However, if you're trying to advocate for being a school counselor, Your principals, your superintendents, they need to be aware you know what you're talking about. And that you know if they question you about your use of time, which we'll get into today, why are you called a school counselor? What are you supposed to be doing in your job? It's here. And you need to be able to back it up with them, okay? So here's what you need to look at within your framework. And of course, you've got the link if you want to pull it up on your computers. So as Brana is sharing that with you, okay, so this is the framework. When you do get it, you can click on it. Like I said, it's 65 pages. I actually just updated it again 2 days ago to add another piece to the end of it. I just want to show you some highlights. Okay, there's table of contents. Let me get to it. Okay, so there's just the introduction. It does show the roles and responsibilities of a school counselor. So you do need to know about that and about what you're supposed to be doing in your role and your responsibilities, what is recommended. And keep in mind too, I am training administrators and superintendents about this a lot. So they're hearing the same message from me that you all are getting as well. Because a lot of them just don't know, to be honest. So we want to make sure we're advocating for what you're supposed to do. Okay. Right here, you are evaluated by OPGES, right? We're in the other category. I don't know why we're other, but we are. Yes, okay. This is a crosswalk between what your principals evaluate you on and what is in our framework. So if they ever come to you and try to say, oh, we do teacher standards, or I don't know how to evaluate you, because some seriously this many years in don't know how to evaluate counselors. Right here is how. So they've got the other standards, but this is how it connects to your framework. So if you're ever struggling to figure out what evidence to show them, how to observe, your growth plan, you can see the OPGS components are over here and how it connects to our framework. And all of these, like 1.2, 1.3, all of those have evidence examples. So that will help you just to even be more focused on what to grow in with your program and as a counselor. But this is nice. I show this to your administrators because seriously, they really don't know how to evaluate you all. So this helps a whole lot. And so they may start asking you about your framework. So make sure you know about it. All right, so there's a crosswalk that's nice for you all to know and your administrators. That just talks about the ASCA model. And then, let me get down here. Okay. So that gets into, okay. So this now gets into our legislation. This is probably one of the most important things as a counselor you need to be aware of. We are one of the few states that actually has use of time and your actual recommended roles in law. Most states do not, and they're actually looking at Kentucky of how to update and change theirs this legislative session into next year. Now, this bill did not come up this legislative session. You all have, I'm sure, been following what's been coming up this session. And at KDE, we are watching it very closely because you all are mentioned in some of the different regulations about to come out if they pass. So we will, of course, release guidance to help you all navigate what you should be doing as a counselor without being, with being legal. So we are watching that very closely because some of it goes against our legal and ethical considerations, to be honest. So we're watching that. But if you look, so we are, it says right there, school counselor. If you are a school counselor, you should have that certificate. And I have a lot of superintendents now that are realizing they have school counselors that don't have a school counseling certificate. Not good. Now, it's not just one district, it's across the state. We have social work certifications. They are hired as school counselors. I'm sure they are fabulous, but if you don't take your school counseling classes, they really are not supposed to be counseling, period. So be very aware of that in your districts about the differences between your social worker, school psychologist, and your school-based therapist, okay? Because that is liability and lawsuits waiting to happen. That's what I've told them. So they have to go through that certification. So right here, if you look right there, number 3, And if you're following along with me, I'm on page 13. So, all right. So our ratio is supposed to be, you all know, 1 counselor to 250 students. Statewide, it's about 1 to about 337-ish. We're getting better, but it's not there yet. Like when I came out of my building, I was still 1 to 450, and that wasn't going to change. Now, here's where your districts get very smart. And this is where, moving into next year, actually this year we talked to legislators, our state counseling association. We were in their ears this session and we're moving into it next session. We are trying to tweak the language where this is focused on school counselors. In Kentucky, it's a loophole a little bit because it says, or mental health providers. So your districts get very slick and very smart. They'll hire a therapist that shows up to your building once a week to get your ratio to 250 or close to it. Now, we know if it's a therapist, they have a caseload of what, maybe 20 kids, 30 kids? You all can see 1,000 kids. That's a problem. And so that's what we're talking to them, like we've got to tweak this ratio, because even social workers, they have a different ratio than we do. School psychologists have a different ratio recommended than we do. So it's getting a little bit more specific with how this is worded to help you all out as school counselors, because you're still seeing tons of kids for academics, social emotional, and college career readiness that some of these other mental health providers, they can't see kids without parent consent for a therapist, medical need. So we're working on some of that language, but just be aware of that. If you're like, we're not 1 to 250, look at the other mental health providers in your districts to see if that's how they're trying to say that you are. This is important right here. The 60% or more of your time is directly seeing students. Again, we're one of the few states that actually has that in there. So when you all submit your use of time, every year by November 1st, it comes to me. And I actually have it for you all today to show it to you. We just now released it a week ago. That's what I'm looking at. So it needs to be honest. And I've told your superintendents, principals for the past year since I've started, that's the one huge stakeholder group that we were missing with this data. Is they were questioning you all. They were saying, well, why is it like this? Why is your percentage not hitting 60%? Well, it's because they're assigning you roles you shouldn't be doing. And they're like, oh, so it's not your fault. And so we're shifting their thinking of what you're supposed to be doing again. But you're supposed to be seeing your students over 60% of your time. That's the recommended role. So that is in our framework. You do need to know that, though, because if they ever question you about your time or try to get you other responsibilities you're not supposed to be doing, it's in law. You've got to see those kids at least 60% of time. And actually, ASCA recommends 80. But here in Kentucky, we're starting at 60. So, okay, so you need to know about that. Yeah, if you're teaching classes for Tier 1, absolutely count that time. Yes, that 60% counts for your Tier 1 classes, small groups that you're running, or individual kids. Yeah, you count every bit of that. If you're in front of kids, it counts as direct services. Okay, then one more thing I want to show you really fast. As you can see, these are all the different practices. We're not going to get into all that today. That's a different training. That I'll be happy to do, but it's a different training. This is your school counselor self-assessment. So we're not doing this one today. We're going to do the program assessment. This is good for you to reflect about you as a counselor. So this is not to be given to your principals. Don't do that. This is really, to be honest, none of their business. This is for you to grow. So sometime when you're trying to reflect on what do I want to grow in next year, this is easy to do, just to kind of, if you want to just print these 3 or 4 pages, just highlight where you are. You can kind of see maybe some items you might want to take a PD for next year, or I don't care to come back and do a training. This is more about you, though, your ethics, your values, how you see counseling, how you're using the framework. So that's more of you as a professional. And then today, here in a minute, we're actually going to do the program assessment, which is down here, which is only 2 pages. So this is part of your framework as well. And we're going to do this one in just a minute. Like I said, it's only 2 pages. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then let me go down. If your districts are hiring school counselors, First of all, they need to call them school counselors. Second, here's a job description already done. It's ready. They don't have to figure out, well, what do we want this person to do? It's here. So if they are looking to maybe allocate you a new counselor or a half-time person, whatever you take, you can get, but this is finished. And I've showed this to the board, like the State Board Association, so they know when they are allocating and funding your counselors, this is what they should be looking for. Not somebody who can do great at paperwork and run ARC meetings. This is what they're looking for. Somebody who can see kids and be proactive. So that's already there. And then, this is kind of where we're going to work through some today. So this is one of the updates. I've added kind of a step-by-step guide to build your program because this was missing. I've had a lot of people the last year ask me, is there like a 1, 2, 3 thing that I can look at to say I'm doing great on number 1, but I need to jump to number 2? Here it is. Okay, so again, we're not going to do all this today, but if there's some things on here you're already doing, you don't need to fool with that yet. Go to somewhere you're not maybe growing as much, like maybe the data or your needs assessment, but that's kind of the step-by-step way. And again, this is a long process. It's not going to be done over the summer. It usually takes about a year, maybe a year and a half, depending on where you are though. But that will give you a snapshot of this is a comprehensive program. It's right there, okay? And then it's very specific. And it's 2 pages. And then I don't know if you all got to join us for the statewide summit for the MTSS we did in February. This is what we released. So this is your Kentucky MTSS model for counselors. We've not had one before. It aligns with the KDE MTSS director, because Melissa Wainwright, she was with me when we were training that day. And in your buildings, if they ever ask you what's your role in MTSS, it's right here. You are supposed to be a leader within your MTSS teams. Does that mean you coordinate all of it? No, absolutely not. But you should have a seat at that table and a voice for your kids and what you're doing with your kids, okay? So that's just added at the bottom. And there's a crosswalk, so you can see the connection between your ASCA model, the Kentucky framework, and the MTSS from Kentucky, that all of your administrators, they've all seen that. That's how your academic people do their MTSS meetings. So now as a counselor, you can see this is how I connect in this work, because you should be within that work. And then that's a sample of a comprehensive school counseling MTSS tier 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So that gives you some ideas of, okay, if I'm looking at building up my tier 2 for next year, here are some ideas and some thoughts of specifics you can add for your kids next year. If you want to try to do small groups, here are some ideas for small groups. If you want to try peer mediation, it's on there. So that's your framework. So we've kind of taken everything into a nice big document for you to take pieces of as you need it, okay? But just be aware of it, because if we're advocating for you all school counselors, as professionals, you really need to know that document, okay? Okay, all right, so let's keep moving on. Okay, so your counseling template, that is a standalone of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you didn't want to print all 65 pages, or if you just want to keep a bookmark of your step-by-step building your program, it's here. It's in a separate document if you were to need it. So I just provided that for you. If you do consider RAMP, the nationally recognized model program with ASCA, it is based on that. So if you do that step-by-step and you apply for RAMP by October 15th, then it's all based on that. So you don't have to double do all this paperwork and documents and things like that and data. So, okay, so define. So when we're in that part of the diamond, this is the bottom part. And ASCA really couldn't give me a name for what they call the sections of the diamond. They just said like sections, and I'm like, that works. We asked them last summer, I was like, what do you call the diamonds within the diamond? And they're like, sections? And I'm like, okay, that's great, we'll do that. So in the define part, again, you don't have to memorize these documents, but as a professional, you need to know what they are. So the first one is your professional standards. Again, our framework is based off this. So if you're following your professional standards as a counselor in Kentucky, you're following your national model, so you're good. But if you ever see that document, that's where like your own mindsets, behaviors come from as a counselor, your values, how you see yourself as a counselor. And then this is your ethical standards. This one right here, you need to know. Of all of these documents, this one right here is the big one, and it's about to get bigger starting next school year if they pass what they're about to pass, unfortunately. It just got updated last year, and if you were able to join us back in the fall for our statewide cadre, Carolyn Stone, she's the guru from ASCA of ethics. She's written all their books, she updated the document, so she joined us, and her training is right there recorded. Now it's 3 hours, but you don't have to watch all 3 hours. There is a document that has it timed for different topics, so like abuse, neglect, LGBTQ, special education. So if there's something certain you want to look at, if you'll go to my website, it's there. And you can go to the 1 hour mark and see LGBTQ. And see or hear her talk about that for 10-15 minutes. Okay? But for you all right now, this is the most important document. Because what they're about to pass is against this document. And I have given amendments. I don't know if they're going to listen, but I have given amendments stating about 5 different standards in this document that if they pass that Senate Bill 150, it goes against our legal and ethical considerations as counselors. Because part of it says we cannot keep anything from parents. That's what it says. Now, as a counselor, you all know when to divulge, talk to families. We know that as best practices. My concern is, and of course it does have in there, if you suspect abuse, neglect, it has that in there. But I'm thinking about a student who would come to me, their parents are getting divorced. Am I going to call mom and tell her everything she said about their family? No. So, but I would in general let her know that, hey, your kid came to see me, if it's okay, So it's really concerning. I know they did add the college career and the academics into Senate Bill 150 because we told them, you all realize school counselors do all this, right? We're not just mental health. We do academics, we do college career, and you're telling us we need parent permission to even talk to a kid about scholarship. And the legislators were like, oh, they don't know what we do. They're not in schools. So they at least added that in there, but there's still so many things that are not good. So again, if it does pass, we will come out with some guidance for you all to help navigate. It's going to be a lot of local board policy, I'm going to be honest, based on our state guidance. But this document, I know Carolyn Stone, always says your legal consideration comes before your ethics. So you've got to follow the law on top of your ethics. Just keep that in the back of your mind because it's going to be tough. And then we're going to get into this document today. This document tells you what to teach kids, K through 12. It has everything, academic, college career, social emotional, for tier 1, tier 2. So anything you ever want to figure out, like what do I teach my kids, it's here. So that way you don't have to recreate everything or try to figure out what am I doing this year. It's here. So those are your defined documents just to keep in mind. And as you can see, we're at the bottom of that triangle, or sorry, the diamond in the section. Okay, so we're going to do an assessment. This time of year, being late March, this is when I know you're like in survivor mode. You're counting on the days until school's out, right? Yeah, you probably were back in like January. Yeah, I know I was. But this is the time of year to start thinking about next year. As hard as that may seem, because you want to have a summer. You want to shut down because you as counselors, you all need to big time with what you deal with every day. So this assessment we're going to do is your program assessment. Do we have those, Bronna?
Is it the one back in front?
Yes.
455. Yeah.
Perfect. Y'all have it. Okay.
And I have all the others ready
Thank
when
you.
you're ready.
Okay. So this assessment, I picked this one because to me, this is going to make just us think about what we're doing today in a little bit of a different light. So your program, this is what we're doing today. This is your comprehensive program. This is going to help you see what am I doing great, but what do I need some growth in? And be honest, it's okay if you need growth in tons of stuff. We've been reactive counseling for 2.5 years now. Some of you still are. So we've got to get back to not putting out fires all the time and helping our students better and really showing what do we do as school counselors. versus just seeing a kid that comes to the office every 5 seconds. Okay? So if you would, take a few minutes on your own, and let's take, you want to do like 10 minutes? And then if we need more time, we will? Okay. So fill out front and back, check mark, X's, whatever you want, and we'll see where you are, and then we'll have some collaborative time, okay? Based on allocations, like I know we were in Fleming County yesterday, for example, there was one school counselor to 2 schools, no assistant principal. There was one principal for each school, but yet she still had to do the ARCs, the 504s, the assessment coordinator, but she was still seeing kids. Like she did guidance once a month, she did small groups. So now they were small.
I mean, you say that. How
But-
beneficial is that, right? Let's be honest, if you want to see a kid once a week, is that beneficial? Probably not, because that kid probably needs more than, you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? I mean,
it really depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, it's funny because I know when we get into the use of time here in a few, it's always a hot topic.
There's only so much time during the day.
Yeah, because our kids are telling us they don't have access to their counselors. And if I have teenagers telling me they want to see you all more, they don't want to see anybody. They're teenagers, right? They want to be on their phones, hanging out with their friends. I'm like, they are telling us they want their counselors. And so that to me is the stakeholder group we're really using to back up our use of time as a state. Is it's not just you turn in your data, here's the numbers, go. It's this is what our kids are saying, not just our student advisory counselor group at KDE either. It's across the state and other groups. And it's the safety report that I'll show you off, like the marshal that, that they go into the schools and they do, of course, are your doors locked? Are your blinds this way? They're now adding school counselors to those reports, which is huge. You talk about administrators starting to shift some thinking, versus just turning in their data to me as a superintendent.
What do you consider it? Administrators what? What are we considering, in your opinion?
So in my
Everybody does it different.
Yeah, so in my experience, I was always part of the administrative team.
Right.
But as a counselor, you're not supposed to handle discipline. You shouldn't be the disciplinarian, but depending on allocations, I know that's happening, which is not your fault, obviously. But I was part of the administrative team, which I value because I am the one person in my building who has a very different view of any kid and any staff member than my principal or AP, even if they were former counselors.
Right.
You are the one who gets in their ear to say, this is what's really happening in our building, like culture-wise. Like sometimes principals don't get to see and hear culture with our staff. They don't see that because they have such a big view, which I get. My husband was a principal for 15 years. You really have to be the one in their ear to say, this is happening in our building. They are not safe. Kids are beating them up every day. We need help. You're about to lose half your staff based on what feedback, because typically they go to counselors to vent. And of course you have your loyalty between both that you obviously want to keep confidential. But part of the administrative team I always liked because you got to help make decisions about which kids go in which classes, in elementary especially, how to do family engagement, valuing my schedule as a counselor, how am I helping with academics, college career, versus I'm not just the SEL teacher, I'm a whole lot more than that. But it's showing them what do we do, and I know like the team I just came from, we had 2 counselors for the first time in all my schools I've ever been at, and we were doing triple the amount of responsibilities than this other administrator. And it was eye-opening when we gave them, because every year all of our office staff, administrators, secretaries, nurses, we had to make a list of everything we did. Ours was triple. Now there's 2 of me, but they were floored at this one administrator had this much and we had a page and a half. So you talk about something's not right, because we were doing so. So for me, if I'm running a building, my counselor's on my administrative team.
Well, in the site-based council, when you get your allocation,
Mhm.
it lists school counselors as
Yeah.
administrators.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask that because, when they want you to be administrator, you are.
Mhm.
They don't want you, guess what? No.
Yes.
In a lot of places. That's why.
That's
Yes.
What your opinion was on how.
Yeah.
And I know everybody's different. I understand that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because, and when I train principals and superintendents, it's the first thing I tell them is like, you are locking down the one person in your building who can deal with some of these kids and the issues. A principal is not going to talk to a kid about a suicidal threat. A principal is not going to talk to a kid about a homicidal threat or abuse and neglect. You can't sit them in the front office for 3 hours while you're doing ARC meetings. What's going to happen to that? I mean, if a family comes in and a student has been abused over the weekend, oh, I'm sorry, I have to go do bus duty for 30 minutes. Why would they sit in the front office, all these people come in and out waiting for you? So it's a shift in perspective of, you've got this expert in your building who doesn't need parent consent to talk to any kid for any reason. Like, we got to start thinking differently with how bad our kids need us. And just the behavioral needs and the mental health needs coming out. So even at high school, you all know. But yeah, I do see that counselors should be part of the administrative team, but not as disciplinarians, not as supervising all these basketball games at night, not that kind of stuff. It's a different type of administrator, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's the way I think. Yeah.
That's my school.
Yeah. No, great questions. These are good questions. Middle school. Do you want to go next? Counseling is not involved in an IEP whatsoever, or a 504 for that matter. If they bring that up, here's why. It's legally and ethically not supposed to be happening because you're not a long-term counselor. You are short-term. So when we're seeing kids like once a week, like you mentioned, we don't see them once a week for 9 months out of the school year. As much as we love our babies, we got to wean them off because our skills we're teaching have to go into the classroom and be self-sufficient. So you're not long-term counselors. That's number one. It's not appropriate. So that's in the appropriate document we'll look at here in a minute, actually. And then I'm thinking in the legal and ethical considerations document I just showed you, I think it's in there that it talks about school counselors are not supposed to be written into IEPs because you're not long-term. Number two, you could be held liable if you miss a session with a kid. It goes against the IEP minutes. And they could come, essentially, I mean, you know how legal, I mean, I've had to do ARCs for 16 years. You're going to get your hand smacked because you didn't meet with that kid because you had other kids in crisis. And I tell them, you cannot write your counselors into those IEPs. So some districts that have heard that message, they're changing that. But, and you all can still see kids. It's not that you're not going to see them, but the fact is, if you're written into that IEP, you have so much more legal boundaries against you now that, and again, you're not a long-term counselor. That locks you into that kid's IEP until the annual review comes up.
And the progress monitoring.
Yes, and that, if you're part of that too. Because if they're wanting the kid to have counseling, then my rebuttal would be not only using, of course, that legal and ethical considerations document, you're not a long-term counselor, that's the appropriate and inappropriate, activities document. I would also ask them if, number one, what's the kid needing counseling for? If it's behavioral needs, that's on the special ed teacher, not to counsel, but to teach the student that behavior. So like if you have a student who you are supposed to counsel for self-management, coping skills, they blow up, they shut down, whatever the issue is, that's on the special ed teacher to teach that student self-management skills, track that data, that's on them now. Now, can you tag team with that and help? Absolutely. And, because if you're teaching that as tier 1, you take that, put them in a small group, individually counsel them to help them. But the special ed teacher would have to know this is what you're talking to that kid about to have the consistent message. Like if you use zones of regulation, for example, it would need to be consistent.
And most of the teachers are LBD, learning.
For example, I know I was the PBIS tier 2, tier 3 coach at all my buildings. So when we've never had a behavior coach, but me and my co-counselor, when I did have two of me, we would help deliver those tier 3 behavior interventions to those kids who were in that tier who needed that individual support. So we would document, I'm seeing this kid and it was no more than 10 or 15 minutes, once a week, or sometimes it was 2 to 3 times a week. But again, it's not all school year. There's an end in mind with him because hopefully we want the kid to scale back to tier 2, right? If we're doing all this to get him and he's this severe, or he could be a referred for special education if that's appropriate, not just a hop, skip, and a jump through MTSS. But we would document our minutes, but we would have to track data, or otherwise you're not seeing, you're listening to teachers who are up to here with the kids saying it's not getting better, when you might have data to prove that wrong, if that makes sense. So, but yeah.
a lot of people think that RTI or MTSS is a way to get in special ed, and a lot of people think it's a part of special ed. It's not anything to do with special ed, but it's interventions, just like she said. If they're in tier 3, if you're doing an intervention, that's good. But the goal, like she said and Caitlin said, is to get them back, to get them out, that they don't have to go to special ed, or that they won't be as identified.
So what if it's a child?
Because when we were looking at our data for kids, especially for elementary, and this is a training your teachers are going to have too, they need to understand it's not a quick fix. Or why do we need counselors? I mean, seriously. This behavior, you may not see improvements for kids for 3 years based on maturity, the teacher, relationships, home life. And so when you're looking at your kids who do get to that tier 3 level, look at your tier 2. Did they just do 6 weeks of one intervention and then you shoved them into tier 3 just because that's like the logistic protocol of 6 weeks? Or are you looking at the kid didn't make progress for 6 weeks? This was the intervention. Do we understand what's the function of behavior? That's the biggest piece your teachers have never been trained on, and all of our counselors, we never get trained on that. And so when we're throwing behavior charts at kids and nothing's working, it's a wrong function of behavior. If you're throwing them into check in, check out, because that's your Band-Aid for the building, that only works for kids who want adult attention. So when you look at like the kids who, like if you have a huge group of kids in tier 3, you need to start scaling back to tier 1 as a building, number 1, and tier 2. Because like I know when we did our elementary kids, it took a lot for them to go to tier 3, I'm gonna be honest. But we had teacher buy-in, because if we did a small group with a kid, but they were still having some issues in the class, then we would turn more to an individual intervention for that kid that maybe 20 kids were doing in our building. So it was still tier 2, but we individualized it for that kid. We didn't just throw them into a point sheet and say, here you go. But at that tier 3 level, I mean, we were doing brief functional behavior assessments as counselors. We would observe them, we have somebody else observe them, we would interview the kid, interview the teacher, and we would have some very specific goals. Now they did have some type of behavior sheet to track data, and I actually have a slide. I mean, I can show you that if you want to see it. But you saw clear-cut percentages every single day of where that kid was. And again, that kid was getting tier 1, 2, and 3. They may have been seeing me 3 times a week working on one skill, but they also maybe even had a small group as well, plus your tier 1 expectations. So I mean, they're getting everything. So I think that's where to think about your tier 3. If they keep staying in tier 3, you have to switch the intervention, or even who's doing it with them. A classified person can do a tier 3 intervention with the kid. They can do social stories, they can do video modeling, so that might be something to think about too, to take it off you, is who can get to that kid? Because it always wasn't me as a counselor. Even after 2 weeks, I would ask my teachers how they were doing. At tier 3 level, yeah. 2 weeks, if they didn't see much of a difference, we're already having a meeting.
Right, because you can't wait 6 weeks before
Yeah,
you have
especially if they escalate really fast and are violent, and yeah. But I have some stuff like behaviorally, things like that. It's a whole different, like slides and training and stuff if you ever need it, so I can talk it through with you. Back at my building, I don't know if y'all have seen that training. I've done it before for probably a year and a half now. I had to create a behavior toolbox for my teachers before COVID, because we had so many kids with trauma, mental health, behavior needs, especially elementary. My teachers could do the training for trauma. They had so much trauma before I moved up to Boone County, and in the moment when a kid is shut down, running around, shouting out, talking to a peer, they didn't know how to handle it, trauma or not, diagnosis or not. And so it was like flare up, flare up, flare up. And so I was like, we got to do something. And so I created that behavior toolbox that had functions of behavior. This is what it looks and sounds like. In the classroom, this is what you can do about it. That's not going to take your time. It's simply putting something on the chalkboard, or checking in with that kid extra once a week, depending on the function. That changed my staff's world. And it decreased our behavior referrals. It decreased my referrals for a bunch of fires to put out, because they've never been trained. The only people who get trained for functions of behavior are school psychs and special ed teachers. As counselors, we never got it. I mean, it's not in any program I know of. But that helped them so much to coach them with behavior, and they welcomed you into the classroom to say, can you model this for my kids? Can you tell me what this is again? And it showed the kids, the teachers were doing stuff for them that met their needs, not labeling them. He's got ADHD, he's EBD, he's got to go to special ed. Especially in elementary. They get very label happy very quickly. Or he needs medication. Can't control it. And don't tell a parent that, or you get to pay for it. So we're going to control what we can for 8 hours a day, and here's it's going to help. So
they write in the IEP, it will be done.
yes. So some of those teachers have to start being trained a little bit differently of things we would never think they need to be trained on, because our kids are so different, and if we're doing the same things over and over, this is why people are leaving the profession, because our kids are so severely behaved right now. I mean, I have a rock star teacher at one of my schools. I mean, she's a teacher you go to, she's about to leave because she's getting beat up every day. And administrators have some of their hands tied too, depending on districts, and so it's kind of a domino effect. But yeah, so
Heather, do you still
yeah.
have your behavior toolbox that you can share with us?
Yeah, I'll be happy to share.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and if y'all want a quick like run through of it, I'll be happy to jump virtually on. It'll take maybe 30 minutes.
We'll do that.
Yeah, if y'all just to explain it. But yeah, I'll share it. Remind me.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you all for doing that. If you want to go back to your seats, kind of get up and stretch a little bit, we're going to move into talking to your administrators. This is going to be really fun.
Okay.
This is my favorite thing to do with people, because you get to role play being a principal. So much fun. You get to act like your principal, which is even more fun.
And we'll keep all that secret.
Okay, they'll need this one.
I've
They'll
got
need,
all the sets right
okay.
here.
Oh, perfect. So they need, so you just get them all. Oh, yes, you've already got
I'll
them.
just give them.
Yeah, because we'll start with that school data summary. Yeah. All right, so part of, like I said, my training for the past year has been I am getting in front of any administrator they will give me to get in front of. That's your principals, AP, special ed directors, superintendents, curriculum coaches, I don't care who it is, because they don't know what you're supposed to be doing. So I'm going to help you advocate for what you are going to be doing. So this is where we start. So Brana's handing out just your sheets, and we may not get to all of them today, which is fine. So, because this is a big one though. This is by far, for sure. If you'll look at your school data summary, and again, all the documents you're seeing, they are ASCA. If you ever do consider going to RAMP to get your program nationally recognized, here are the documents. You've got them, okay? All right, so program planning. Now we're in the manage section of our triangle, okay? Now, this is a big section. We will not get through all of it today. I'm going to hit the highlights that I think you need to know moving into August, to be honest with you, okay? So your school data summary, if you'll look at that, and you don't have your data in front of you, that's fine. We're just going to ballpark it today. So just estimate. You know your buildings, you know your needs. But this is going to help you start showing your principals how much of an expert you are at knowing your school and your district and the data behind what you're doing as a counselor. That's what we've got to start thinking as school counselors. You can't walk into your meetings and say, well, the legislation says I have to see kids 60% of the time. You've got to show data to prove it. What are you going to improve? What are you going to decrease if you are seeing kids more? Okay? All right, so let me pull it up here. And I think, did I put a sample in here? No, okay. I can't remember. Some of these documents I just wrote down a sample and some I didn't. There we go. Okay. Now, this is very broad. We are about to talk about your administrative conference with your principal. This comes first. You won't give this to your principal. This is to help you get your thoughts together, and then we're going to look at the paper you do go into the meeting with your principal, okay? So, if you want to be a good school counselor, this is what you think about when you are planning your program every single year. So number one, who in your building can get you data? You should not have to print off all your reports. I know we love Infinite Campus, and that's sarcastic completely, but you should, if you need behavior data, Who's got behavior data? I know you could get to it, but who can print off a report very quickly? Principal or AP typically, or if you're lucky enough to have a behavior coach. Who has attendance data? Secretary. Why are you printing it? My secretaries were amazing. They could do it in 5 seconds. It took me 30 minutes to figure out where we even was in Infinite Campus. And I worked with it for how many years? Academic data. If you have a curriculum coach, they can specifically give you what you need. State assessment data, novice reduction, if you do STAR, map testing, some of those like formative assessments, they can get you whatever you need, okay? If you do need free or reduced lunch, if you don't have access to it as a counselor, your Frisky for sure does, or your principal might be the only one who does. They should be able to at least give you a snapshot of what that looks like in your building to cross-reference with some other things, okay? So, you need to find your data expert. Number 2, do you know what your CSIP says? Your school improvement plan. If you do not, before next school year, you need to look at it. Here's why. If you want job security and you want to be a school counselor, you should be part of that CSIP. Talking about social emotional learning, reducing behavior, increasing academic needs. Something about what you do in that building should tie to your CSIP. And your principals, if you can talk about the CSIP, you talk about getting advocacy for what you're doing. Because a lot of counselors don't realize that. Not that you have to be written in like you're going to see all these tier 1 classes. It's not that specific. But obviously, I guarantee you now that the state assessment data came out a few months ago, that's a big one on your CSIP is increasing achievement. And I guarantee a lot of schools are going to have something about decreasing behavior. We are school counselors. We do both. Now, are you going to teach reading? No. Are you going to help kids who are challenged with reading to have a growth mindset, to maybe get their scores up? Yes, that could be something you could do. Number 3, think about your data reports. Now, we're not going to go into a lot of data today because that's a separate training because it gets into the weeds very quickly. Just overall, think about in your building, you are very data rich. It is overwhelming. It was overwhelming for me as a counselor. I had to pick just a couple of things. So attendance, that's usually an easy one to start with. That's a quick report, chronic absenteeism report. Your secretary can print that off for you. You can see the percentage of kids who have missed that over 10% is usually what you look at. Create a tier 2 intervention, maybe even a tier 1, depending on what you need. But don't look at 20 different reports. You won't even know where to start. So if you're thinking about next school year, you know your kids, like behavior for certain things is off the chain, then focus on the behavior report. Now, I will put a bug in your ear about that. Think about your tier 1 system for behavior. If your teachers are happy to refer kids constantly, kick them out of class constantly, you doing a tier 2 intervention for behavior is not going to make a difference. I hate to say that, as rock stars you all are. Because it's a tier 1 issue, it's not a tier 2 issue. So I say that not to say, oh, I can't do behavior. Oh, you absolutely can. But it's conversations you might bring up to your administrators, principals, PBIS team, to say, I'm looking at this data. I would love to help with this behavior. But we are referral happy in our building. Do your teachers know when to refer? What's happening to the kids when they do refer? Do they just get to go hang out in the office and color and listen to music? You know, so you have to think about your tier 1 system. Okay? So again, number 3, pick one thing. Maybe 2, depending on if you're comfortable with data. Okay? Number 4, review data from other resources. So let's say across the state, attendance is an issue. We know this. Let's say that's your big focus next year. We want to get kids into our building. Okay? Great. Chronic absenteeism report, perfect place to start. But that can't be your only piece of data. We got to figure out why the kids are not coming to school. So that's where number 4 comes in. Who else do you need to talk to about these kids? Talk to the kids. That's my first go-to. Even if they're third graders, they can tell me why they don't come to school. They hate it. They hate their teacher. They hate math. Mom and dad won't wake up to put them on the bus. They'll tell you what's going on. Okay? Do you need to look at your climate survey? You know, we have those surveys now everybody takes in the whole state about your climate culture of your school. I want to tell you what, it's very honest what the kids tell us about how our schools are doing and how safe they feel. And then if, as a counselor, if you do a needs assessment, that could be something you might consider. You don't have to create it though, okay? And then number 4 talks about the previous 2 or 3 years. You know, you could go back before COVID. I wouldn't, to be honest. You know, right now, I'd probably look at the past year and a half right now. And then number 5, how does your school compare to other schools? Like if you know attendance is an issue, behavior, maybe kids who pass certain courses. I know on the dashboard on KDE, they show you all schools and their data. So that might be something to consider as a school that's similar to yours. And if their scores or their data is really good, your principals would know that. Say, hey, can I call them and see what they're doing to get this increased at our building to see if we could do something similar? So it kind of gauges how, you know, if you're doing, oh, okay, good, we're not that far gone yet. Or, wow, we're really doing better than everybody else. We didn't realize it, but we are. So it might make you feel good about yourself too, that, hey, I'm really doing a lot. And then down here at number 6, that's where you really specify your data priorities. Now they've got 4 listed there. Pick one. Maybe 2, depending on your comfortability, whatever that word is, comfortableness with data, okay? So this gets your mind around what am I about to talk to my principal about, okay? So that's where it starts. When you're planning your program, this is your first document to just start working through, talking through, okay? And we're about to do this principal paper here in a second. But again, you can see some of them are tier 1, you know, some of them are tier 2. It just depends on your building, okay? Okay, so I want to make sure you saw that. Okay, so now this is the paper you're going to actually fill out some today that you would take into your principal meeting. So that's where we're going next. This is one of my favorite things to do. It's so much fun. So how many of you have a meeting with your principal before the start of the school year? By yourself or as a counseling team? Okay, good. Okay, hopefully you're going to do that next year. And you're going to role play today. If you take nothing else away from today, this is the most important meeting you will have all year. This is going to advocate for what you do as a counselor, your use of time, your data, what you're doing in your school, okay? The administrative conference, you are going to think very deeply about what you are proposing to your principal. So it usually takes 15, 20 minutes, to be honest with you. This is not like a 1-hour meeting, unless they just talk a lot, which is great, and they want to see you that much. Usually they don't have that much time, and you don't either. The biggest thing we're going to think about with this is we are thinking like our principals. You've got to put that hat on. They are going to question you. They're going to push back. They're going to talk about funding. They're going to talk about, well, if you're not doing that role, who am I going to get to do it? Because they're thinking big picture in your building. Why should I give you more time with kids? Why should I take you off the ARC meetings? Why should I take you off printing report cards for 3 hours every so many weeks? They're going to push. So we've got to have things to back us up versus the state says so. You could totally throw me under the bus, perfectly fine, because we do. But that's not going to help you. You got to show some numbers and some data, okay? All right, so if you'll get the paper, I think it's red. It says administrative conference at the top. It's got some pink on it. Okay. All right, we are actually going to fill that out as best as we can without you having specific data in front of your eyes right now. That's okay. All right. And I've got a sample. It's on your slides, but I'm going to put it up here just to help you navigate how to fill this out. Okay. So you are a Rockstar counselor. You put your course of the year. All right, so the first thing up there, it says, after completing the school data summary, that's that form I just showed you that we didn't do, okay? That's just helping you think about what data priorities do I have for my counseling program this year. Here's why I say that to you. My first job as a teacher, my principal, who was amazing, he called out our kindergarten teachers in a faculty meeting, and they were amazing. And he said to them, and this is like 20 years ago, he said, "Why are you all teaching our kids rainbows for a month?" And they're like, "Well, they learn art and they do this and blah, 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 blah." They really didn't have a lot of data to support. And he said, "The hallways look great. Your classrooms look great." He said, "What data do you have to support? They need to know about rainbows for a month." And it was crickets. Now that's 20 years ago, so it was a shift back then in education. So as counselors, are you doing fluff because it's fun and the kids like it and you like it and it's comfortable? For example, I had a counselor in Christian County. She asked me, October. What month is October?
Halloween.
Halloween, what else? Red Ribbon Week, Bullying Prevention Month. Okay, so as counselors, typically, what are we focusing on? Bullying prevention, red ribbon, right? She asked me, she said, "My data is showing me my kids need self-management. They're not coping in the classroom, behaviors are increasing. Do I have to do red ribbon activities and bullying prevention in October? Because that's the month." And I said, "No." And I said, "You teach what your data is showing you to teach." And I said, "However, could you do school-wide activities promoting Red Ribbon Week, drug prevention?" Absolutely. Could you have school-wide activities you're promoting bullying prevention? Yes. Do you have to teach it in a class? No. So when you're thinking about your calendars for next year, like obviously you're going to have plans, but be data-driven. Because I can tell you right now, a lot of what you're going to plan, even in the next year being, again, a normal year, it's not going to happen. You have to start shifting your outlook of data. Because if your principals only see you doing themes every month, you're going to get called out. Like, why are you doing, I'm trying to think what December is. December something. Why are you doing that in December? We have kids blowing up down here. Like, they need self-management. And you're like, well, we do it every year. That's not good for you. So think about your data, okay? All right, so up here at the top, if you would, you know your building. Think about next school year. Just make up a number, make up a need. Up at the very top, just pick one just for the sake of talking through it today. What is something you want to focus on next school year for your school? Whether it's a grade level, it's maybe a small group of kids, like for example, 30 kids are coming into next school year, they're gonna be chronically absent, like you just know they are, okay? Or these 20 kids, they're gonna be behavior issues. You know what's coming, okay? So at the top of your form, just, write just some kind of ballpark, like this one says 5th grade students with 4 or more absences. That's a place to start. So just kind of estimate something you can talk through today, okay? Like the other one, 47 3rd grade students had 4 or more counseling referrals based on having anxiety during the last 9 weeks of school. So that's right now. If your door is blowing up with kids that have anxiety, that's next year what I'm focusing on. Because that actually happened. That was my last go around with my 3rd graders. Anxiety was, apparently like catching on like it was the cold in 2 of my classes in 3rd grade. It was like the cool thing to be anxious. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. One of them had long-term subs, so bless her. Whew, she had criers every day. We're like, we got to do something. Yeah. Okay. So now, based on your data priority, you just made up, kind of realistically. Then here comes your SMART goal. Okay? So, and I think in these slides, I put some examples of some SMART goals. But just for your, let's see. I think it's in here. Let me look. Let me see if I put the examples down here somewhere. Oh, there they are. Okay. So like my elementary people, and it's in your slides if you want to glance at it. Here's some examples of a SMART goal. It's purposeful. It's got your data. Again, for this purpose today, just make up a number. It's okay.
And these are the same kind of goals you'll have on the
Yes, this is what your CSIP shows.
So,
Yeah. Okay, so there's your elementary examples, and then the next slide, there's some secondary examples. So again, I don't want you to recreate all this yourself. Data was not my biggest genius as a counselor because we were so data rich, it was overwhelming. So I would take these SMART goals, tweak the numbers, tweak the year, what activity or the need, and go. Just change the words. Okay? Okay, everybody got something kind of, because you're going to talk about this in a second. That's why I'm asking you just to write down something based on what you need for next year. Okay? All right. Okay, so we got some type of SMART goal. Here's the big one, and we are going to get into this more deeply after your administrative conference. Your use of time. This is the biggest thing probably you can advocate for. Now, you can see it has two different sections. It's got your use of time from this school year right now and what you are proposing for next school year. Now, we'll say, do not go into this meeting. Let's say if you're at 40% direct services, that's how you're seeing kids face to face. Don't jump it up to 80. It's not going to happen. Unless your principal is a rock star and yeah, that would be amazing actually. It probably won't happen. So small baby steps, and I cannot say that to you enough today. Baby steps. This is not a quick fix overnight. So like for example, I dropped it, I put it up to 50. That's 10% more of my time with kids. That's great. It's something, okay? Now, your indirect services, that means you are having meetings on behalf of kids. So that's when you're talking to your families, your staff, about kids, you're making referrals to community agencies, to tutoring, to job shadowing opportunities. That's when you are collaborating about behavior interventions, SEL interventions, scholarships for, talking to families about that. You are the consultant. Families call you. My kid shuts down during homework every night. What do? They're seeking your consultation. You're the expert, right? You're supposed to be. That does not mean you're chairing ARC meetings. So don't put that time there. It's inappropriate. Not going to go there. Okay? So indirect is anything talking about your kids. If you're taking notes in an ARC meeting, not counting. Building assessment coordinator does not count for that. Okay? And then your program planning and support, that's what you're doing today. You're talking about your program, you're planning, you're looking at data. Throughout the school year, you're glancing at your behavior data, your attendance data, your CSIP. That's what that is, okay? Typically, that's not over 20%, very typically, okay? Now, your non-counseling duties, okay? That's the stuff you're not supposed to be doing. But it's okay. We all have to. I always chaired ARC meetings in every one of my buildings. I was the assessment coordinator in 2 of my buildings, unfortunately. One of my buildings, I had to manage all the records. My last building, I had to print report cards. So we all have things we're not supposed to be doing, but we want that percentage over there to go down while your direct services go up. That's what we want to see the change, okay? So you can see, I kind of, think about realistic percentages, okay? And then the next down there, that's just your ratio. How many kids are you a counselor to? 1,000? 450? Even if you have 4 counselors in your building, you're probably seeing a lot more than just your grade level or your alphabet. Okay? And then the program implementation, those documents, we're not even looking at those today. That's another training, so don't worry about that today. Okay, so skip over that. Advisory council, some of you mentioned you might want to try that. Then you can fill that out to say, hey, I'd like to propose having an advisory council. I'm going to piggyback off the family resource meetings, same stakeholders. So that's easy to fill out. Proposed members, well, you probably already have them. Okay, and it's twice a year. Meet more if you'd like to, though, obviously. Okay. And then the next part is PD. You're going to talk to your principal already before August what possible PD might I get to attend? If you are Kentucky School Counselor Association, it's $25 to join. We have webinars almost every month. You get a discounted rate for state conference in September. And you get our newsletters, you get access to the website more than other people do. So yeah, $25. But that's PD, and we do all kinds of different topics. I mean, all the things, you know, that I know I do at KDE with the co-ops. We do our cadres 4 times a year. It's free. Yeah, they're 3 hours. February's, you know, a whole day. If you're lucky enough to get to go to the ASCA conference, this year it's in Atlanta, so it's close. If you're lucky enough. And speaking of the School Counselor Association, if you all would like to present, let me know. I will send you the link. We're taking proposals. We would love to have some of you present if you really want to. It's only 1 hour, and you get to meet all kinds of fun people. We're always looking for awesome presenters, so keep that in mind if you're like, I could share about my small group, or I could share about my data. Yeah. And then the last one, school and district committees. So tell your principal, you know, do you all have district PLCs that you meet with counselors? Do you do maybe statewide meetings? Any professional work you all do, okay? Are you on a committee maybe in your community that works with social workers and other agencies? That counts for this, okay? And of course, budget materials. If you get money, I never did, but if you do, write down what you want. I want zones of regulation. I would like some small group things. There's your office hours. I don't think that's really negotiable, but you can try. I don't know. I think that's like district mandated. Okay, and the last part, other staff and volunteers. This is anybody you can think of that helps you with your counseling program. This is not a you show. If it is, you're going to get burnout and you'll be gone by next year, if not before that. Okay, most of you are not 1 to 250, and if you are, you're still got your hair on fire all the time. You have to delegate. It's okay. Like, you know, we were talking about with my teachers to help me with behavior and SEL. I taught my teachers functions of behavior and how to manage behavior in the classrooms. That decreased my loads a whole lot. I trained essentially the village that wraps around our kids. My classified staff, they helped me do all kinds of stuff with our kids. My related arts teachers, they would run small groups for us if it was appropriate for their genius. Not like grief, but they would do self-management. They would do impulse controls. A PE teacher, they know stuff I would never think of. It's amazing. So like, for example, school counseling department assistant, that's just what ASCA put on here. I don't know what that is or where that exists. If you have one, I'd love to know about it. I don't know who those are because I've never had one. But they might schedule meetings, help track your use of time. Again, I don't know where they exist, but just in case you have one, it's there. Your attendance clerk, they can run reports. They can help you figure out if kids are starting to not show up for school, tell you about new kids coming in. You might want to tour around the school, meet their families, not copy the records. Be clear about that. The data manager, if you have a registrar at your school, they could run reports for different types of data you may need from them. If you have a college career coach or some type of assistant, maybe in your buildings, they could help with like some of your ILPs. Okay. Any other staff, like I put curriculum coach. I work with my curriculum coach a lot to cross-reference kids I saw with behaviors and how they were doing academically. Again, that's your MTSS if you're part of that. You should be. If you have a behavior coach, fabulous. Don't know where they exist, but if you have one, great. Team leaders. If you ever have team leaders in your building who are doing meetings, that's how you get buy-in for your counseling program to see kids. They need to see results. They need to see you out and about in the building. So other staff to help with interventions or small groups, okay? Community agencies, think about all those people you work with between therapists and health professionals, psychologists, your frisky social workers, business partners, chamber of commerce, any of those count for this. Volunteers, how do you do volunteers with your counseling program? And then of course students. I always put students on here because they're my number one stakeholder. I'm asking about how things are going. They're going to tell you the truth about what's happening in your building.
Heather, have you got any, like, some, interviews for MP that we could use, you know, or needs
in a-
assessment, or where do we find those?
So in a different slides, I have some needs assessments, and then I have a sample of an empathy interview template.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want me to share that, yeah. Okay, and then that's just where you sign. You don't have to do all that. Okay, so you're writing some things down. You kind of get the gist of what you're about to do. Okay, I know this seems like a lot. If you do this up front before you walk into this meeting with your principal, it's going to go so much better. To be honest, they're not going to know what hit them. They've never
be
had this
really
meeting with a
nice.
counselor, I guarantee you, before you. They don't know, and they really don't know what even to start questioning. I'm going to be honest. Now, I will say, we are going to role play this, okay? So let me go back up, because I have some things for you to consider when you do role play. Right there. Okay. So you are going to be the principal, and you're also going to be the counselor. You're going to flip-flop here in a minute. Think about your administrator. Think about their world. They are worried about the entire building. You are too, but they have a very different lens as more of a manager versus you collaborate with every stakeholder so differently than they ever could. You really do, okay? But they need to know, why should they care about your program? They know they get you allocated. Why should they care about what you're doing versus you're going to run art meetings? Seriously. How does your program support the school's mission and vision? So the CSIP will help with that, but think about your school's mission and vision and how you connect to some of that. How do you support the CSIP? They need to know you're more than an SEL teacher and that you're more than mental health. That's not just what we do. We have to be college career experts and academic experts. How do you support student success? What knowledge do you know that no one else does? That's a big one if you want more direct services with kids. So if you're decreasing your non-school counseling duties into the direct services and increasing that percentage, you need to say things to them like, you know, we had a family come in, a student had been abused over the weekend. They had to wait in the office for an hour while I chaired an ARC meeting. That's not professional, and it's not good for the kid or the family. When 16 different adults probably see them in the front office and they're upset. School counselors, here's what you're thinking about. How do you collaborate with everybody? What input do you have for schools and decisions to be made? You look at kids in a very different lens. Not that we're going to poor baby them, but you are an advocate for those kids who, when they are in those MTSS meetings, they're shoving into special ed. And you can say, whoa, hold up. It's only been 6 weeks, and they're 7. So we got to back off a little bit. What committees should you be on? Are you in the leadership team? Are you in front of your faculty doing trainings, maybe 10 minutes every month about mindfulness and SEL skill? How to increase stamina when kids are working, when they're doing core, classes. What issues does the admin see within our school, and is there data to support it? So if you know your behaviors, like most everybody else, is worse, and your attendance is worse, how would you support that? And how can they help you serve all kids? That's the big thing. You're not a therapist. Your tier 1 is where you will spend most of your time, to be honest, as a school counselor. Okay? Okay. So that's just some things to consider. All right? Okay, so we're going to practice. Now, this is meant to be uncomfortable, so it's okay. When you are the principal, I want you to push back. Not be rude to each other, obviously. Now, if your principal's kind of rude, then you can act like that. That's fine, because you're going to have to deal with it. You know how it is. Some are. But I want you to push each other. Ask questions, okay? Because if you don't practice now in the right way, you're going to fold when your principal asks you questions. You're going to be like, oh, I never thought about that. And then you're going to walk away with nothing. Keep in mind, have plans B, C, D ready. I'm going into this with this great idea, and if my principal starts pushing back, I'm going to back off and do plan B, then plan C. So if I say, I would like all the ARC meetings taken off of me next year because I can give you that many hours to serve students and to increase attendance, to increase behavior management, whatever it is, they're going to say, yeah, we don't have the manpower for that. So say, could somebody at least take the speech arcs off of me? I know for me, that was 300 less meetings I had to do in my last building. That's huge for me. So baby steps is what we want. If we don't get everything, we have to have backups, okay? So just keep that in mind as you're having these conversations, all right? Okay. Okay, so if y'all want to partner up, spread out so you can hear each other talk. We're going to take, we'll do like 10 minutes.
See, one of you all partner with Aaron there.
Yep.
I forgot about, yeah, okay. That'd be good.
All right. Okay.
I see her.
So let's do like 7 minutes each. So each of you can have 7 minutes and then we'll flip flop just for time's sake, okay?
Just
All right.
You can move to another table if you want to,
All right.
like a couple of you, move to another
Okay.
table.
All right. I hate to stop you, but just for time's sake. So how did you feel doing this? Like, did anybody?
Oh, Michelle. Tell us.
Did
What did
it-
you say, Bonnie?
I was uncomfortable because of principal.
Yes,
She wasn't very
good.
nice.
Okay, uncomfortable. Did anybody feel kind of like anxious, a little bit stressed, uncomfortable? Kind of? Okay, good. I I want you to be uncomfortable here and not in front of your principal. Does that make sense? Think about our kids we counsel. I want my kids to blow up with anger in my office and teach coping skills versus in front of 30 kids in a classroom. We've got to push buttons. Okay? So that's why we do this. Is I want you to get used to that feeling. It's going to be, I hope it's a great conversation. You got to be proactively ready though. It may not go well. And they may not listen to a word you say, but you're going to try. And they're not going to know what hit them when you walk in. Now, don't shove this paper in their face and say, this is what I expect. Don't do all that. You may not even need the paper, to be honest with you. That's for you to have your talking points of what you would like to foresee for your program. Because I know if I'm a principal and if I hire a counselor, that's what I'm looking for. Seriously. Because if you can come to me and tell me you can decrease behavior, man, why wouldn't I give you more time with kids? But now you've got to back it up, because if you don't do it, come December-ish, they're going to be rethinking what you're doing. So, and you're not going to get, of course, quick results from every kid. You all know that. But it's just, if you're in front of kids more as a counselor, you're going to help everything about that school. College career, academic. Think about your staff turnover. You essentially would help all these dominoes that are now affecting our teachers to stay in the classroom more, to not be as absent. So you could even bring that up to your administrators. I do have some that talk about that. They say our teachers are not coming to school because of behavior. Here's how I can support that as a counselor in Tier 1 with our students. Here's a training I could help with our teachers to just help them be proactive with behavior and get ready for what's about to walk in the door. I think that's what's happening. They're not ready for what's walking in the door every day, and they're exhausted. Y'all are exhausted. So anything like that y'all can, get in your principal's ears. You all know it matters. And it also matters how people perceive your principal, your buildings, social media. Think about what can you get in your principal's ear that's going to make your school look good. That's a big deal. They love positive PR, especially now with how the news portrays our schools. You talk about that? Yeah. So anything you can do to advocate, and again, it's baby steps. If you can't get all of your ARCs off of you, records, at least a small portion, okay? So, all right. So if you want to go back to where you were sitting, we're going to move into the use of time, which is a hot topic, but you need to know how to talk about it. And make sure you know what it means, because I know I love ASCA, but some of the words they use are so similar, it's kind of confusing. So we were like, what's that even mean? I was like, that's just what they call it. Okay. So, like I said, in Kentucky, Senate Bill 8, we are mentioned, specifically school counselors. So appropriate, inappropriate. Where have you seen that chart? Yes, some of you have. Great. I hope it's in your office, put somewhere where everybody can see it. I hope it's on your social media. If it's not, go home today, print it, and put it up tomorrow. Don't put that in your principal's face either. I told you not to do that, so don't do that. So don't blame me if you, don't do that. But you need to know what it says. So like we talked about, 60% are direct. You're in front of students, you're doing instruction, appraisal and advisement. That's when you might give your needs assessments, you're doing surveys with kids, you're advising them on their schedules, that's fine. Counseling, you're actually counseling. Your small groups, your individuals, you're not long-term. You've got to make sure you're not doing long-term counseling, okay? There are going to be times when you have to see a kid for 2 hours, it's in a crisis, possibly all day. That happens. Not all day, every day, all year long. Can't happen. Your indirect services, again, those are the meetings you have on behalf of students. So when you show up to your MTSS meetings, you're talking about kids. If you do join an ARC meeting for special ed, you're talking about the kid. You're not taking notes. Okay? Very different role. So the inappropriate and appropriate paper, I've linked it in case you do not have it, but here you go. This is super important. And yes, I show this to your superintendents and your administrators. Yes, I show this to them a lot because they've never seen it. And keep in mind, we are one of the few stakeholder groups that actually has this. I've asked, do principals have this? And I've never been given an answer. They don't have this. I don't think school psychologists have this or social workers. So we're one of the few, our national organization provided this for us. So again, this is something, if you have social media, this needs to be on there somewhere, okay? If it's somewhere visible in your office, that would be great, okay? But again, don't put this in your principal's face and say, I can't do any of that. Don't do that. Because again, we do allocate percentage of your time to do some of that because we know, especially in Kentucky, I mean, like we've talked about, some of you have to do some of that or else it wouldn't get done, unfortunately, just because of funding and allocations. So like building the master schedule, you talk to kids about scheduling, right? Perfectly appropriate. Should you be an Infinite Campus having to build it? No, your secretaries can do that. That's logistics. I know it may be your wheelhouse and I applaud you for it. That's not your job though. So again, if that's one of the things you want to talk to your principal about, you can even say, I will train somebody all next year of how to do this, and then that next school year, you're rolled off of it. That's always a great bargaining chip, is I will sit with her and help her do this. Okay? So again, it's more like logistics, secretarial type work that we are not supposed to be doing. Coordinating paperwork, data entry of all kids, you all should not be doing that. Again, secretarial work. Now, should you be talking to new kids who come to that building? Yeah. Should you be looking at their records? Yes. Because a lot of times people will put things in those records. Probably shouldn't be in the records, but they usually are. So, custody papers, social service type, yeah. Dig into that, doc, but don't be copying them, organizing. That's not your job. You should meet the families, tour them. Or if you don't tour them, have kids in your building tour the families. They love that, okay? But you shouldn't be managing all that paperwork. And then, let's see. Okay, so like testing. Should you interpret different assessments? Yes. You do need to know some of those assessments like your school psychologist would give it to your kids. Because you need to talk through if it's different rating scales for behavioral needs, if it's a different academic needs. You should be an expert at analyzing that to know how to drive some of your program to help kids with academics. But should you coordinate assessments? No. You're not the building assessment coordinator, nor should you be. And I tell administrators, anybody in your building can be trained to be the building assessment coordinator. They don't realize that. It doesn't have to be an administrator. It can be a teacher. It can be a librarian. Somebody you trust and who's organized can be the assessment coordinator. Done. And apparently it's easier now that it's all online. I don't know. I was always with the booklets and all that fun stuff. Performing disciplinary actions. You should not be seen as a disciplinarian. You should not be assigning detentions and suspensions. Now, could you be rolled in on a conversation? Principal gets a referral, student comes to the office, you know the kid, they roll you in on the conversation to figure out maybe what happened. That's fine. But they shouldn't put that kid in your office and say, hey, they got a referral, you counsel this kid, you deal with them. Absolutely not. You are the counselor, not the disciplinarian. If kids start seeing you as a disciplinarian, you have lost all credibility with those kids. And I hate principals. I know they don't want to deal with it. I get it. We don't either. But we know that that kid will never again share anything with us or help us with interventions. None of that's going to happen. Which is another thing you might consider. I don't know how your districts handle this about restraint training. It depends. I've been in one district, never trained us for good reason. One district did. So keep in mind how you are seen by your students. If you are restraint trained, I hope you are the last man on that totem pole to ever have to deal with a kid being restrained. Because you do not want 1,000 kids or 10 kids to see you grabbing a kid and taking them somewhere as a counselor. Very different mindset. Let's see, long-term counseling, it's right there. Providing long-term counseling for students. So my special ed people, yes, IEPs right there. Highlight it. There you go. There's one example of it. Covering classes when teachers are absent. I know right now we have to. We have so much shortages of counselors, teachers, administrators. So I hope that's going to get better. Next year it may not, I'm going to be honest. So as least as you can. And if they do say, well, you don't have a homeroom, you're a counselor. Well, I've got a kid up here that's threatening suicide. I've got a kid down the hallway about to explode in his classroom. I can help de-escalate. I've got 2 new families that showed up. I need to go meet them. I have a family coming in that needs some counseling referrals. So think about what you do that nobody else in your building can do so somebody else can cover those classes. So try to think about that, okay? Because again, not everybody can talk to those kids. Maintaining student record, you shouldn't be doing. You should not compute grade point averages. That's a secretarial duty. Now, should you analyze them? Yes. Figure out course passing, scholarship opportunities, things like that, yeah. Supervising classrooms, common areas, that's part of that non-counseling role. School functioning activities. We know you all probably have to watch a lunchroom, do bus duty. It's school functioning. I always had to as well. But again, it should be very minimal. Very minimal. Let's see, assisting with duties in the principal's office. You shouldn't be doing that. And there's the big one at the bottom right there. Coordinating school-wide IEPs or 504 plans. It is in black and white. You are not supposed to be chairing any of that. But now, do we have to sometimes? Yes. Unfortunately. But when I talk to our administrators about that, that's what I tell them. Think about counselors. We are never trained on this in our graduate programs, ever. We show up to a district at a 3-hour training and we're shoved into special ed world all of a sudden. And then we get pushback if we mess up something on a conference summary. Or if we forget to schedule a meeting on time. Like, why is that even a thing? No. And they always ask, well, if they're not doing it, who is? Well, right now, the only people who could do it are your principals and your APs, unfortunately. A lot of districts have special ed consultants, even small districts. They've gotten somebody in there with their special ed funding who can chair every ARC meeting or at least take a number of them off of you all. So I do tell them it's not about hiring more people, it's about you need to shift some of your ARCs to other people. At least some of your speech ARCs, preschool ARCs, annual reviews. You know I had a principal one time that I had to do the ARCs at all my counties I've ever been in, but she kept the lawsuit happy parents. She's like, I'll take those. And I was like, thank you. Because that's usually your 2 to 3 hour long ARC meetings. So that helped at least take some legal things off of me. But it's there. And I know I get the question about the MTSS. You should not be coordinating the whole school MTSS. Now, should you be a leader at the table in MTSS? Yes. You should be talking about behavior, SEL, coordinating with your academic person. Yeah, you should be a part of that team. But if you're coordinating academics, behavior, all of that, that's not appropriate. That's way too much.
So
Yes.
when you're talking about the 504 plans, are you saying that we shouldn't even be the ones developing the 504 plans?
Mm-mm. They're not supposed to be.
So who does that?
Well, the
Principals and APs, or a special ed consultant if your district has them.
504s, like we were talking about, they are not, I mean, you don't get any money for a 504, you know, they're not special ed either, you know?
Nope. Yeah.
But yeah, it's your, you know, it's your principal. that's
Yeah.
supposed to be-
Yeah.
Because they're the only ones that can say,
Yeah.
if you have to spend money for a program or something, they're the only ones that can say, we can do
Right.
that,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. But yeah, technically, we're not supposed to be chairing those meetings. But I think, to me, 504s are easier for them to push at us because typically those students have the mental health disorders like ADHD, anxiety, depression, things like that. We're like, oh, well, the counselor can take care of those. Which, could we talk about those kids? Yes.
Yeah.
Should we be coordinating the paperwork? No.
For instance, like my 504s are typically seizure kids. I have several seizure
Yeah,
kids.
of course.
And I have a student with ADHD
Yes.
that have 504s, because, you know, mine's small.
Yes.
But, so that should be more.
Somebody else should be chairing the meetings, keeping up the paperwork. Yeah, you really should not be doing that. But again, if I'm going into my principal and I'm trying to take something off of me, I start with special ed. I would rather take 504s all day long than anything with special education because it's just so much more for somebody to come at you and smack your hand about. And to me, we get so perfect at special ed world that we feel like I think everything has to be that perfect, and it doesn't have to be. So.
Meeting, I guess, at the beginning of the year. And look, I did not have a special education background. I came from the, normal
Regular
classroom.
classroom.
And, so, they were talking about the importance of being a shared person and kind of the liability, like when you put your signature on there and stuff. And so, like, when I'm having to be the chairperson for speech and for,
Yeah.
I'm basically signing my name, trusting
Yes.
that something that I don't know nothing about, and I'm not doing no paperwork. I'm just sitting there sharing,
Yes.
and signing my name to something, trusting that the special education teachers who are actually doing
Yeah.
or the speech, that I'm trusting that they're doing their paperwork, which really.
Yes, because if you're the chairperson, who are they questioning first? You. Why wasn't this IEP done more with fidelity? Why does your conference summary say this? You forgot this part. And you're like, I'm a counselor. I got 3 hours training this year. Well, and keep in mind too, typically when principals or APs do these meetings, they're not taking notes. Special ed teachers are taking all the notes. Now, if they're talking, like if I'm sharing, the goals and the progress monitoring for my kid as a special ed teacher, somebody else in that meeting can jump in and start typing the minutes. And when I'm done talking, then I take back over. That makes sense? Because a lot of principals and APs, they don't want to take those notes. Like we would, obviously, because we are amazing.
But I'm going to tell you this. If you do chair the ARC meetings, read the conference summary before you sign anything. Make sure you read it, and because you're probably not taking the notes, it's probably your special ed teacher. But as many of them as you can get out of without making your principal mad, you know what I'm saying? Do
Now,
that.
504s, I kind of enjoy because we try to set ours up, our new ones coming into the middle school. We try to set those up in the summer when it's not so, you're not so busy, and parents can come in and you can meet parents and
Yeah.
you get to know, and most of them are health issues.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
that's what I was telling her. Like we mostly, when I was principal, we had health issues, asthma, bee sting, allergies.
Diabetes.
But if you have something like, if you have ADHD or seizures, anything that keeps the kid from learning, they can be other health impaired.
Right.
So you won't
Yes.
need a 504
No.
Right.
Yeah.
for those kids.
Yeah, because they can't have both. Yeah. Right. Except I did have one kid who had a speech IEP, and he had a 504 for behavior. I've had that happen before, or speech was through special education, but he also needed a 504 for his behavioral diagnosis, or even something for like diabetes or a health diagnosis. So very rare you'll have kids that might have both.
Yeah.
But it's got to be like, it can't be the same. Like they wouldn't have one for ADHD and an IEP and a 504 for that. Like that wouldn't happen.
So
Yeah.
like you have, with your
Yeah.
health kids, you have to have that health plan too. So
Yeah.
that's in Infinite.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, no, you're
Sorry.
fine. No, you're fine. So when you think about your use of time, so this is how we're going to finish today because we're not going to get through everything, which is perfectly fine because y'all had great questions, and that's why I like the smaller groups because y'all can drive what we're doing. If you do not keep your use of time, you need to start. I'm just going to say that. Because it advocates for what you do, and you cannot argue with your data about how many hours your ARCs take, and that includes you coordinating paperwork, you having to schedule them, you talking to your special ed teachers to make sure they have their stuff ready. It's hours on end. Building assessment coordinator, how many hours does that take throughout the school year to do those trainings, train your staff, get that stuff ready? So when you're thinking about your use of time, here are some options in your slides that, and there's not really like I can't say there's one size that fits all. It's really based on what you like and what you can do, okay? When I was a counselor, I used my calendar. I never had a Google form or a spreadsheet. I tried the spreadsheet. It got to be overwhelming, and I kept forgetting to do it every day. So I got into my calendar, and I color-coded everything. So every time I did a direct service, I color-coded that. Every time I had a meeting that was appropriate and it was indirect, I color-coded that different. Anytime, now I'll tell you what I did do, when I did special ed anything, that was a totally different color by itself. Because it shows very glaringly the hours I was spending. I mean, we had the highest special ed population in the entire county in Boone County. So I was in ARC meetings, and there were two of me, 2.5 days a week. 2.5 days a week I was in ARC meetings, and my co-counselor, we had to take, like, one was the morning, one was the afternoon to make sure one of us could see kids, because otherwise you're shutting down your counselors for 2.5 days. And it was still exhausting. So my calendar could very quickly be looked at to show what I was doing, and I shared it. So if you have your calendars, which most of us I'm sure do through Google, Outlook, whatever your schools use, you need to share it with people. Share it with your principal, your assistant principal, possibly your secretaries, who might maybe help you with some scheduling something. My nurse had access to mine, my school psychologist, well, I didn't have a frisky, but if I did, she would have, or he, okay? Think about the people who you collaborate with. Like all my teachers, of course they didn't, they don't need to see my calendar. But anybody who needed to see what I was doing. So that way, crisis happens, they see I'm in ARC meetings for the next 3 hours a day. Somebody's either going to cover it or, bless that kid's heart, they're sitting in the office for 3 hours.
Well, that's good. That lets the teachers know that I couldn't come to the kid because I'm in an art meeting.
Yes. So that to me was easy for me just because I was already putting it in my calendar anyway. I just marked a different box for my color. Now, when I had to do the statewide use of time before I became the KDE, I did have to go back and kind of ballpark my data for a whole year. So that was a little bit time consuming. There's a Google form you might like. A lot of people now are doing Google Forms. Daily, it takes probably a few seconds. Some are doing spreadsheets. ASCA, their 5-day calculator, that's actually only meant to be done twice a year. That could be an option just to get you started. Like you could do it now, before spring break, after spring break. Now, don't pick the week where you're slammed with transition ARC meetings. Think about over a whole year, what are your kind of normal-ish weeks? That's where you want to kind of start. And they do have an app you can download on your phone. It's called MAP. And you can do it on your phone too and do your use of time. They're actually working on one now where a whole district could access every school in your district. Like that'd be nice. They're still working on it though. SCUDA, have y'all heard of that? Okay. If you haven't, SCUDA between now and the end of the year is free. So you might look at signing up for that, for the free version of it between now and December. It's free. Just to give you a glimpse of that I really like how SCUDA, I mean, it narrows down everything. It's similar to Google, but it's just a little bit easier. Something that is going to come out from me in probably mid to late May, so in about 2 months, I'm going to release a statewide system for use of time. It takes you 2 minutes a day. We're piloting right now with about 30-ish counselors, so they can say, this is awful, this is great, fix this. And I'm going to release it statewide. Not that you have to use that, but that's the biggest question I get everywhere I go, besides the use of time and stuff, is I need something to do my use of time with. I've played around with it, and it takes me 2 minutes a day, max, to do it. It looks like an Excel sheet, and it has your indirect, direct, all that on it. You just put X's in of what you're doing, and it tabulates it immediately. So you can see your daily total, your weekly, your monthly, yearly. So when you have to submit that to your superintendent, to me, it's done. You don't have to fool with it. So I'm excited about that, and we're going to release a video of how to do it. It's real easy, but to see it done. We had some new data people at KDE come on board who just did our use of time reports, and they're like, we can do this for your whole state. You realize that, right? And I'm like, then go for it. It's like, so they have created this, and they are amazing. So I'm excited for y'all to see it. That'll come out in May. So it'll be here soon. So we'll add that to this. But those are just, you need to just figure out what works for you. And I know with the one I'm going to release, as long as it's done 2 to 3 days a week, they said it's still fine. If you're doing it once a week, it won't be with Fidelity. But that's with anything, I think. But those are some options, because again, it advocates for your time. If I'm going to my principal, and actually when I left last year in January, this school year they just started, they took off all of the speech arcs from my other counselor, because our use of time showed how many hours we were spending in special ed meetings. It took 4 years, but I was like, oh, I'll leave and you get all this taken off of you. Great. But it's a start. It's something. Like, she's so excited, and, you know. So I've shared with you the 2022 statewide data. We had every district fill it out this year. The first year it was done, before I came, there were like 37 districts that just didn't do it. I was like, that's not okay, because it's in law. Your superintendents have to submit it. It's not an option. And of course, people are like, well, what happens if we don't? Well, I have to give your names to higher ups that are not as nice as me. So 100% of districts filled it out. We had over 1,800 counselors fill it out. And you can kind of see from the different levels. And even within this data, I'm sure we're missing a couple counselors here or there, of course. So, you know, this is not as concrete as I'm sure it could be, but this is a whole lot better than 2021. And then the student input, this is what I was talking about. Kids are talking about our counselors. Our student advisory council at KDE asked me to join their meeting just to talk about you all. To say, tell us what they're supposed to be doing. And I said, well, I showed them that document. Here's the appropriate things your counselor should be doing in your buildings that we are advocating for them to do. And they said, oh. I mean, they're having some of their friends wait weeks to months to see a school counselor who's in their building all day. And as a teenager, that is very concerning, because they're saying, because they know their friends are dealing with stuff. And if they can't see a school counselor, something's very wrong. So I'm really talking this up, and actually the kids, even Lieutenant Governor Coleman student groups, and then some other groups of the Whole Child, Whole School Community Agency, they're hearing the same things across the state, which is good for us, because that means we're hopefully going to get just more advocacy for us to see kids, which is what we went into this job to do. And then there's the school security marshal report. Your principals know about this one. These are the people that show up and check about your doors being locked, the exits are labeled. But I appreciate they're asking counselor questions. Now what's going to happen this coming school year, though, is they're actually going to talk to counselors. because they are talking to people that aren't you all. And they assume they know what they're talking about, and I said, no, they don't. So they need to talk to the counselor. Even if they have to yank you out of a class, sorry, you can blame it on me, to ask you about your use of time, to say, how's it going? Are you seeing kids? You know, what support do you need? So they're going to talk to you all, if whoever shows up. But based on that report, you can see a certified school counselor is employed at 93% of our schools. Every school is supposed to have one. Now, out of that, there's some that are not certified as school counselors. They shouldn't be school counselors. So I know I get that question a whole lot. So we're working on that. Let's see, 56% reported they're not meeting the ratio, which is about right. So that's good to start, right? Because we want to be honest. Currently, Kentucky's overall ratio is about 1 to 348. 96% report that they do document their time with students. I don't think that's accurate. They didn't ask school counselors. They asked their principals. I think they assume you all are doing it, but I don't think they really realize what you're supposed to be documenting, like that use of time. So I think they think you are, but a lot of us aren't, just because, so they're going to start talking to you all to get the real picture of what's happening, because that helps us at the state level advocate when we meet with superintendents and principals to say, this is what's real, and we've got to fix this to help your kids. So there's going to be more specific questions coming this next school year. They will ask, hey, can you show us your use of time? They're going to ask. And it's okay if you don't have, they're not going to be like, oh, you're fired. Please don't think that. But it's going to give us data to say, hey, we only have 30% of our counselors who really can show us their use of time. That is support then that we need for you all, and growth, and principals to say they need time to look at their data to see what they're doing.
Will individual districts get their individual reports back, or will it just be statewide?
For the school security report, I think they do. I thought they did. Now, for my report, we are actually looking at a district dashboard. We're hoping. We have proposed it. We don't know if it's going to be funded, but we're looking at a district dashboard to put up on my website for KDE. So every year you can see how your district is progressing with your use of time, the counselor appropriate, all that stuff. So it won't be this school year just yet, but we're hoping that they're going to approve that, which is exciting. So like if I'm in Boone County, I can jump in and see every year how we're doing.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's real good.
So there's the funding. Of course, they have to always say how you all are funded. There's ESSER, is a little bit in there too. There's your appropriate, inappropriate that the state reported. The appropriate went up just a little bit, which is good. Still not where we want it. I'll be honest, too much, 28%. And if you look right here, the 49.6%, overall, that's how much we're seeing kids in Kentucky. Direct services.
So half of the time, barely.
Barely half of their time. We are recommending how much of our time? 60. That's in law. So we're not there yet. So these are great talking points I can use to advocate for you all to see kids. And it backs up what our kids are telling us too. They're not seeing people. There it is by level, so you can kind of glance overall statewide. Here were the top 10 inappropriate activities reported, because you have to type in there what you all do. And I was so proud. I just don't like these numbers, not that. Last year when we analyzed this data, half of the inappropriate activities were actually appropriate. So when I had to do this in front of the superintendent's administrators, I had to tell them, I'm helping our counselors understand these are actually appropriate and they're okay to do, because some of it was like family trainings, transition activities. That's appropriate things we should be doing. Every one of these this year, it's for real inappropriate. So we're starting to get it. This is amazing that now we can talk about, I shouldn't be doing this. So this is great. And of course you see scheduling and ARCs and 504s. You see how much is happening. And I put that table together when I do train administrators. That's kind of a snapshot of our other document, but just so they can see, appropriate is you all analyzing data. It's inappropriate to be the building assessment coordinator two very different things. Because when they see that, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then there's KVEC. So you can kind of see your district on there. So again, we improve some. So the appropriate is like the dashes. I know Jackson Independent and Jenkins Independent, like y'all are rocking it 100-0. Now, is there some skewed? Yeah. Now, do we know is this perfect? Of course not. No. But this at least will give you a clue, and you're more than welcome to share this with your principals and your superintendents. This is public. This has already been released through KDE 2 weeks ago. I'm actually sharing this with the Superintendent Advisory Council in May. So, for the whole state, not just KVEC. But it gives you a snapshot of just kind of how your district's doing. And like I said, hopefully next year we're going to have just as good of data to now we can compare 2 years of the entire state submitting data.
Do you have Johnson's data?
Do you all sometimes use a different co-op?
I think they use KEDC.
Okay, I have KEDC if you want to see it before I leave real quick. I have every co-op. And it's based off, I think they may have done it off special ed co-ops. So some of you may show up in a different, or if you use 2 of them, I think they just picked one when they did the data. So yeah, I can show you that. Okay, so that's where we're going to end today, because otherwise we're getting to a whole other 30 minutes of data. All right, so we're going to stop there. So just to consider, so now we've gone through some things today. It's been a lot. You got to practice. What are some next steps that you're thinking you may need moving into August? We were at Christian County last summer, and they had a 2-year plan. They removed the building assessment coordinator this year right now from their counselors so they could shift more to looking at tier 2 and tier 3 services. They were already doing tier 1. This coming school year, they're looking at ARCs. And in front of those principals, the assistant superintendent was talking about this, and of course the principals were like, we don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They were very honest. And it wasn't, like you said, it's not malicious. They generally don't know because so much has changed. I mean, I know it's been shifting about 8 years now, but they don't come to counselor trainings. They don't, so, and so much of the framework, I updated a week ago. I mean, they don't see any of this. So we're really working hard with those stakeholders for you all. For your counseling program, how would kids access you? Do you want to use a Google form for the kids to fill out? But now you got to check it. Obviously, check your spreadsheet. And I know in my former building, we had this half sheet of paper, and I can show it to you if you want to see it. They were always in the front office, and we trained our staff and the kids how to use it. They could come up to the office, fill out the paper, and it was a triage form where they had to say emergency, see me today, see me within 2 to 3 days, or see me this week. And the secretaries would tape it on our door. So if we were in classes, ARCs, whatever, we came back and I may have 5 sheets on my door, I could triage it and say, okay, I got this kid today, I can see these 2 tomorrow. And one of my guidance lessons was teaching the kids, this is emergency, this is 2 to 5 days, so they knew the process, and that helped a lot just to not have to put out fires so much. And if a kid forgot sometimes, because you do have sometimes drama queens and everything's an emergency, we would remind them, baby, this is not an emergency, this is 2 to 5 days. And I said, I got you. But that helped too, because the teachers, and then some of those kids who did want to come see us, taking that walk to the office and back sometimes de-escalated. They took a breath. And they knew they were coming right back to class where they weren't missing class. I didn't have 5 kids standing in my office. It wasn't driving the secretaries crazy. So that helped some. But now if I was in secondary, I would for sure use some type of Google form or like a barcode they could scan and do it on their phones if, they allow phones. But yeah, so that may help at least some fires for you to have to put out.
And maybe if your principal has a staff meeting, you could ask them, can I have maybe 10 minutes just to talk to the teachers? And like if we do her toolbox, you can say, I'm here to help you all, and this is what we can do.
I'm gonna try to create a PD of some sort, and I'll be like, hey, I'll do it, just let me do it.
Yes. Well, and I tell you what, the slides, if we're going to do it virtual or whenever you want me to, the slides that I will do with that toolbox, you can share with your faculty.
Okay.
because I was telling Verona, it goes through like 4 different sample kids, like Johnny's in 4th grade, this is what he's showing us, this is what Dad says, what's the function of behavior, what interventions would you do for him? So as a staff, they can start talking amongst themselves, oh, well, I think it's adult attention, I think it's escaping work, so then what do we do about it? So they can start changing their paradigm of behavior versus, oh, he's low, he's ADHD,
There's just
no support at home. Again, they want to label so fast that we can't let them. Because it's not going to help the kid. He has ADHD, great. He still has to function.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't help us. I mean, you know, but anyway.
So, but we will plan to do that toolbox with Heather pretty soon.
Okay.
Because, you know, the end of the year's coming and you know you're gonna need it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
the warmer
as
it
soon
is,
as we
the
can,
worse
we'll
it
do that.
All right.
And it will be virtual, unless y'all wanna see me again.
Verona's so much fun.
Cross that mountain.
I don't mind to drive up here.
Hey, it's a good drive. It's a long drive for us, isn't it? Okay. Go ahead, Heather.
No, I was just gonna say, if y'all need anything after today, I know you've got more slides that we went over, so just ignore the rest of them unless you're an overachiever and you just wanna jump right in, you go for it. That would be amazing. But, there are ILP updates. If you do the ILP, my site has all the updated documents, including an elementary playbook that has K through 4 on that one. Developmentally appropriate career, videos, books, activities. So if your
Awesome.
district's looking to vertically align, that may be help, but yeah, everything's been updated, so that may help too, with some more timelines that are specific. Not
Really
not
good.
career cruising, that's not IOP, that was a system. But the timelines at least will show you specifically more of, what do I think about in 6th grade, 7th
That's
grade?
exactly
Oh,
what I
good,
wanted to do.
Yeah, so those are in the playbook. So if you go to my website, just type in KDE ILP site, click on the middle school playbook, for example, then it'll be for every grade level.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was
that's
used to
awesome.
doing
Force
career
copy it, you got
cruising
it.
and it, you know,
Yeah.
you got done. You were, you know, you did this and this and this and this for this level.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of like, I don't know, when I'm,
And just email me if you can't find it. So my email's on the
Okay.
first slide. Feel free to email me and I'll send it to you.
okay, great.
But that may
Yeah, because
help.
I'm doing it right now. I'm in every day.
I'm trying to think what else. Early graduation program, updates are out about that. It's a lot for that one. That one's a big one. I don't think anything else. Again, School Counselor Association, if you would like to do a proposal to present, I will send you the link. We're always looking for amazing people to present. It's only an hour.
I just got an email while I was sitting here. that-
Six-
Really? They sent it out? Okay.
Well, our Europe, people are gonna pay for us to go to the state thing.
You have to come. It's beach themed. It's going to be amazing. We're going to have a lot of fun. I already got all the swag bag items in my house right now. There's like 6 boxes.
Oh, there you go.
I'm like, I want to open it now, but I can't. So, yeah, you'll have to come. It'll be fun. Yeah, we had 600 last year.
Gosh.
Yeah.
These are your feedback to get your ELA certificate, so I'm gonna give you those.
Yeah. But email me for anything, even minimum graduation requirements. Just email me. I'm pretty quick on email, unless like today I'm traveling all day. But tomorrow I will be on email most of the time.
Go ahead,
But
is that-
yeah, I'm happy to help, and even if it's talking through some more of this, I can jump on a virtual meet pretty quickly. So just let me know. I'm here to advocate for you all. If you'd like me to talk to your superintendents or principals, I'd be happy to. Take some of the heat off of y'all. I'd be happy to. So,
Sounds good.
yeah.
I'm sure glad you guys came today, and
I'm so
Heather's
glad
been
we did
wonderful.
too. That's-
Give her a hand, she's awesome.